The game no one was watching. Power is rarely loud. It doesn't always announce itself with speeches or armies. It doesn't always sit in offices or wear uniforms. Real power moves quietly, through decisions, disruptions, and shifts that most people don't notice until it's too late. While the world was distracted by headlines, scandals, and noise, a deeper transformation was taking place. A transformation that did not begin with war, did not begin with treaties, did not begin with collapse. It began with a man who refused to play by the old rules. The myth of the obvious leader. The modern world was built on a simple assumption: that global power is managed by institutions. The United Nations, NAID, the World Bank, the IMF, trade agreements, diplomatic norms. Presidents and prime ministers were expected to protect these systems, not question them. Donald Trump did something radically different. He treated the system itself as negotiable. And that is where the game changed. Why the media missed the real story. Most people think Trump's presidency was about tweets, controversies, elections, personal drama. That's the surface story. But while critics focused on style, Trump was altering structure. He wasn't trying to dominate headlines forever. He was testing limits. What happens if America refuses to carry the world? What happens if alliances cost money? What happens if trade becomes leverage? What happens if enemies are named openly? These questions were never meant for television. They were meant for power centers. The secret role: accelerator, not architect. Trump did not design the new world order. He accelerated its arrival. The old system was already cracking. Globalization was failing large populations. Western middle classes were shrinking. China was rising without adopting Western values. Institutions were losing legitimacy. Trump simply removed the masks. He forced everyone to stop pretending. From global leader to power broker. Before Trump, America acted like a global caretaker. After Trump, America began acting like a strategic broker. Protection was no longer free. Trade was no longer neutral. Values were no longer unconditional. This terrified allies. But it clarified reality. In power politics, clarity is more dangerous than chaos. The shift from morality to interest. For decades, Western leadership relied on moral framing. Democracy versus tyranny. Freedom versus oppression. Good versus evil. Trump replaced that language with interest-based logic. Who benefits? Who pays? Who gains leverage? Who loses control? This wasn't cruelty. It was realism. And realism reshapes behavior. Why global elites felt threatened. Trump didn't just challenge foreign powers. He challenged global elites. Elites thrive on predictability, on continuity, on systems that protect themselves. Trump introduced uncertainty. Uncertainty forces adaptation. Adaptation threatens comfort. That's why opposition to Trump wasn't only political. It was systemic. The world reacted quietly. While cameras focused on Washington, the world adjusted. Europe reconsidered defense dependence. China accelerated self-reliance. Russia tested boundaries. Middle Eastern states hedged alliances. Corporations diversified supply chains. These reactions were not ideological. They were strategic. And they continue today. Power without control. Trump's secret role was not control. It was disruption. He broke assumptions without offering replacements. That forced others to create their own strategies. In power games, forcing your opponent to move first is advantage. The invisible consequences. Look at the world now. Multipolar power blocks. Weaponized trade. Energy as leverage. Technology as battleground. Conditional alliances. These didn't appear suddenly. They unfolded after the old guarantees were questioned. And that questioning began during Trump's presidency. Why silence matters more than action. Trump doesn't need to speak now. His impact is already embedded. Leaders still plan for uncertainty. Markets still price in instability. Allies still question reliability. That's power without presence. The game has changed forever. The most important truth is this: the old world order cannot be restored. Not by elections. Not by speeches. Not by nostalgia. Trump didn't destroy it. He revealed that it was already dying. This is only the opening. The new world power game is not finished. It is still unfolding. And the most dangerous phase comes after exposure. When players adjust. Trump's secret role was never about winning the game. It was about changing the rules. How Trump turned trade into a weapon. For most of modern history, trade was treated as something neutral. Something technical. Something boring. Something handled by economists, not strategists. It was supposed to connect nations, reduce conflict, and create shared prosperity. But beneath that polite theory, trade had always been power. Donald Trump didn't invent that idea. He exposed it. The biggest lie of globalization. For decades, the world believed a comforting story. If countries trade with each other, they won't fight. If supply chains are connected, conflict becomes too expensive. If money flows freely, peace will follow. This belief shaped everything. Factories were moved overseas. National industries were dismantled. Dependence was reframed as efficiency. And slowly, quietly, control slipped away. Trump looked at this system and saw something different. He saw vulnerability. Why trade was never just about money. Trade determines who controls production, who controls technology, who controls employment, who controls survival in a crisis. When America outsourced manufacturing, it didn't just lose jobs. It lost leverage. Trump understood something many leaders avoided admitting. A nation that cannot produce cannot command. The moment trade became confrontation. When Trump announced tariffs, critics called it economic suicide. Markets reacted. Media panicked. Allies complained. But tariffs weren't the point. The message was. The message was simple and brutal. Access to the American market is a privilege, not a right. That sentence alone rewrote global calculations. Why this shocked the world? For decades, the US market was treated as guaranteed. Stable. Permanent. Open. Trump shattered that assumption. And once shattered, it could never be restored. Countries realized something terrifying. Their economic model depended on American tolerance. Tolerance can be withdrawn. China understood the signal. China didn't hear chaos. China heard strategy. Beijing understood that Trump wasn't reacting emotionally. He was attacking dependence. By weaponizing tariffs, Trump forced China to confront its greatest weakness. Export reliance. This wasn't about winning a trade war. It was about forcing a structural rethink. The real target, supply chains. Trump rarely used academic language. But his actions pointed to a clear idea. Supply chains are strategic assets. Whoever controls supply chains controls pressure points. Medicines. Electronics. Energy infrastructure. Food systems. Trump made the world realize how fragile modern economies had become. From efficiency to security. Before Trump, efficiency was everything. Cheapest labor. Fastest delivery. Maximum profit. After Trump, security entered the conversation. Where is this made? Who controls it? What happens in a crisis? Those questions changed corporate behavior forever. Why this shift survived Trump? When Trump left office, many expected a reversal. It didn't happen. Because the logic was undeniable. Even governments that opposed Trump publicly adopted his framework quietly. Trade agreements became political tools. Sanctions became routine. Economic access became conditional. Trump normalized economic warfare. Allies felt the pressure too. Trump didn't only pressure rivals. He pressured allies. Europe. Japan. Canada. Everyone learned the same lesson. Friendship does not cancel interests. That realization hurt, but it was honest. The end of economic innocence. Trump ended economic innocence. No more pretending that markets are neutral. No more pretending that trade is apolitical. No more pretending that prosperity equals safety. Trade became what it always was beneath the surface. A battlefield. Why corporations panicked. Multinational corporations thrived in the old system. Predictable rules. Open borders. Cheap production. Trump introduced instability. Instability threatens profit. That's why corporate opposition was intense. Not ideological. Economic. The world began to adapt. After the shock, adaptation began. Factories moved. Suppliers diversified. Governments subsidized domestic production. These changes were expensive. But vulnerability was more expensive. Trade as a signal, not a tool. The most important thing Trump did wasn't the tariffs themselves. It was what they signaled. That America was willing to endure pain. That markets could be closed. That globalization was reversible. Those ideas changed strategic thinking worldwide. Why this matters for the future. In the new world power game, trade is leverage. Markets are weapons. Access is influence. This is the reality nations now operate in. And it traces back to one moment. When someone stopped pretending trade was harmless. Trump's unseen victory. Trump didn't win the trade war. That was never the objective. He forced recognition. Recognition that economic power is national power. Once recognized, it cannot be ignored. The game moves to the next level. With trade weaponized, the battlefield expanded. Technology, energy, currency, data. Trade was only the opening move. A world that can't go back. Even today, leaders speak the language Trump forced into existence. Resilience, decoupling, strategic autonomy. Different words, same reality. The silent transformation. Trump doesn't need credit. His influence is already embedded in policy, planning, and fear. The world learned a lesson it didn't want to learn. And once learned, it never forgets. Breaking alliances without breaking them. Alliances are supposed to feel permanent. They are built on ceremonies, flags, shared history, and promises repeated so often that no one questions them anymore. But alliances don't collapse when they are attacked. They collapse when they are exposed. Donald Trump didn't destroy alliances. He tested them. And many failed the test. The comfort of guaranteed protection. For decades, America played a unique role in the world. Not just as a superpower, but as a guarantor. If you were an ally, you were safe. If you were under threat, America would respond. If you followed the rules, protection was automatic. This created stability. It also created dependency. Trump saw that dependency clearly. And he asked a question no one wanted to answer. What exactly are we getting in return? Why this question was dangerous. In traditional diplomacy, some questions are never asked. Not because they are wrong, but because they reveal uncomfortable truths. Trump asked them anyway. Why does America pay the most? Why do allies underinvest in defense? Why is loyalty assumed but never measured? These questions turned alliances from sacred commitments into negotiable arrangements. That shift terrified the world. Alliances as transactions. Trump didn't speak the language of ideology. He spoke the language of transactions. Who pays? Who contributes? Who benefits? Who takes advantage? To career diplomats, this sounded crude. To strategists, it sounded honest. Because beneath every alliance is an exchange of interests. Trump simply removed the poetry. Europe's moment of realization. Europe was the first to feel the pressure. For generations, European security relied heavily on American power. U.S. troops, U.S. intelligence, U.S. logistics, U.S. nuclear deterrence. Trump didn't threaten to remove them. He questioned why they were there unconditionally. That was enough. European leaders realized something unsettling. America might not always carry the burden. The end of strategic comfort. Comfort is the enemy of preparedness. Trump destroyed comfort. Suddenly, defense spending mattered again. Military readiness became urgent. Strategic autonomy became a real discussion, not a slogan. This wasn't rebellion. It was adaptation. Why allies felt betrayed. From the Allied perspective, Trump's approach felt like abandonment. But from Trump's perspective, it was correction. He believed alliances had drifted from balance into dependency. And dependency weakens both sides. Strong alliances require strong partners. Trump forced allies to confront that reality. The silent message to the world. Trump's message wasn't delivered in speeches. It was delivered through doubt. Doubt is powerful. When allies doubt guarantees, they prepare alternatives. When rivals doubt commitments, they test limits. This reshaped global behavior. Rivals were watching closely. Russia noticed. China noticed. Iran noticed. They didn't see chaos. They saw recalibration. They understood that America was redefining the cost of protection. This altered strategic calculations everywhere. Alliances became conditional. After Trump, alliances were no longer assumed. They became conditional. Based on contribution. Based on alignment. Based on shared risk. This is not weakness. This is realism. Why this be undone? When Trump left office, allies hoped things would go back to normal. They didn't. Because once trust becomes conditional, it cannot return to blind faith. Defense budget stayed higher. Contingency planning continued. Independent capabilities expanded. Trump changed behavior, not just policy. The paradox of stronger but fragile alliances. Today's alliances are paradoxical. Stronger in capability. More fragile in trust. They rely less on promises and more on interests. That is Trump's legacy. The old world is gone. In the old world, alliances were moral commitments. Protection was automatic. Leadership was unquestioned. In the new world, alliances are strategic arrangements. Protection has conditions. Leadership must be justified. This transition did not happen by accident. Why this was Trump's most subtle. Trump never formally withdrew from major alliances. He never dismantled them. He simply forced them to evolve. That is far more effective than destruction. The alliance game today. Look at global politics now. Countries hedge their bets. Allies prepare backups. Neutral states gain leverage. This is the new power game. One where flexibility matters more than loyalty. Trump's quiet warning. Trump warned the world without shouting. Dependence is dangerous. Security must be earned. Power must be shared. Many didn't like the message. But they listened. The game moves forward. With alliances transformed, the power game entered its next phase. Energy. War. Technology. Regional dominance. The rules had changed. And everyone was forced to play.